The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as sports, aviation, business, literature, music, and education. We'll explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Shirley Stewart Farmer, famous attorney, musical jazz performer, and good friend. Good to see you, Shirley.
It's good to see you too, Roscoe.
Now, tell us about your music career, and then we'll talk about your legal career. How did you get involved in music?
Well, at 4, started ballet training.
Now, where'd you grow up?
Chicago. Chicago, Illinois, toddling town.
Huh?
Yeah. And I stayed in Chicago. I did all my schooling in Chicago, including law school. And I had an opportunity to sing in the chorus of of Faust, where Robert McFerrin was the baritone.
Where was this in Chicago?
This was in Chicago, Civic Opera House.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, did many black folks get into that at that time?
This part?
Did many black folks get into that?
No. But this was Mary Cardwell Dawson would put on these operas, and she was a wonderful impresario, and she did it in Chicago, and she did it in New York and Philadelphia, and she would put on these operas with various people. And so that was. But I was going back to how I first got into music, and then I would sing in church when I got a little older, and then I was dancing in my 20s, and I almost went on the road, but then my mother was going with a lawyer at the time, and he said that this contractor, you're going to be stuck somewhere. So I said, well, okay, I can sing longer and I can dance. So I was concentrated on singing, and I started studying vocal music when I was 18 in Chicago Musical College. All this time I was still going to school and working on the academics, but you had to have the music too.
Now, what high school did you go to in Chicago?
Wendell Phillips.
Everybody went to Wendell Phillips in those days.
That was one.
Buddy Young went to
Wendell Phillips or DuSable.
Yeah, Buddy Young went to the famous NFL football player.
I was in the high school band and marching up and down the field when Buddy was out there playing.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was a freshman when he was in his senior year, but it was you freeze yourself to death.
He made quite a contribution. He was a track star, a football star, and then a great executive at the NFL, and helped to give opportunities for black players and so on.
Yeah.
Chicago also has a guy who's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What's his name? The president, Obama's from Chicago.
Obama.
Very good.
But he's a later comer.
Very good. Now,
my dad
how did you get into jazz? Because I know you've done a lot of classical work, but how did you get into jazz?
Well, I always liked to try to sing it, and it was kind of funny because I was trained operas, music, and so, and I never really wanted to take all that sound out. And I was going to Roosevelt College for a while, and they had jam sessions. And I would go and try to sing, and everybody laugh at me. And they had a bunch of friends, and they would do blues. Everybody would be singing the blues, and it was so funny when I tried it. But anyway, I kept that up, and like I said, I got this chance to sing in the chorus of Faust on the Civic Opera stage. Then I started concentrating mostly in the law, in studying. And then when I graduated from college, and then I was as a social worker, or actually a probation officer in the family court, got interested in law. Now this was in 1957. And at that time there were very few women in law. So I said, I left there after a year, and I went to law school at night. I wanted to see if I would like it. I did, and while I was there, and I said, okay, I want to do this, and so I went full-time, daytime. And my dad had died when I was 8, but one of his fraternity brothers was a prominent attorney in Chicago, Bob Ming, and he and Bob Ming and George Layton.
Right.
And Bob said, well, I don't think much of women being in law, but I'm going to take you on as a clerk, and I'm going to see if anything, if that would improve the situation as far as a female in law. And then when I graduated, unfortunately, I had met Art Farmer. I met him, and he brought
music.
And he carted me off to New York, and I've been here ever since. And it was terrible of me to not stay with Bob. And he used to beg me to come back, but I said, no, I can't.
When you first came to New York, what was your introduction to the music community through Art and all the people he was dealing with?
Right.
Well, how did you find that? Was it exciting? Was it new to you?
It was totally new to me, and of course I was a hick.
Mm-hmm.
Here I was coming from Chicago. I'd been very sheltered.
Sheltered in Chicago?
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I was living with my mother.
I know that. I know. But tell me, how did you relate to the musicians once you got there and they began to see that you had some talent?
Well, that didn't happen then. That was only later on, much later on, when I started getting involved in singing jazz and putting on shows,
What led you to do that?
Love of music.
And
of the singing and the freedom of jazz, being able to improvise, which is quite different from doing a concert, where which I did a town hall concert in '74.
Balancing an attorney career and a music career, that seems very, very difficult.
Well, it is, because it means that you're not going to be really a star in either one, because in order to really get prominent, you'd have to really concentrate. Well, I never could concentrate on one because I needed both. Mm-hmm. My psyche needs to have the music. My psyche needs the challenge of solving problems in the law, So that meant that I'm using both sides of my brain in my psyche, and it keeps me very happy. I have lived a very good life. I'm not worried about making a lot of money, so that is not a problem.
But a lot of your music has to do with the so-called standards.
Yes.
The Rodgers and Hart.
The American Songbook.
So on. That's really great music. I know Ella Fitzgerald made her career singing standards for a long period of time. Now you do standards too.
Yes, I do.
What are your favorite standards?
Well, like Lush Line, Stardust.
That's Duke Ellington.
Of course.
Okay, let's hear a little bit of Lush Life.
Okay.
Used to visit all the very gay places, those come-what-may places, where one relaxes on the axis of real life to get the feel of life. Brunches and cocktails. The girls I knew had sad and solid gray faces. These long gay dresses that used to be there, I could see where they'd been washed away. 1, 2, in the room the day 12 o'clock days. Then you came along with your siren song to tempt me to madness. For a while, your spoiled smile was tinged with the sadness of a great love yes, I was wrong again.
That was really great. That's classic Duke Ellington, written by Billy Strayhorn.
Right.
That really is the heart of music. And
Definitely.
when you do these performances, how do you select your material? How do you choose between Rodgers and Hart and Gershwin and Frank Lesser? How do you do that?
Well, the DVD that she played the song from was a show that I did in 2009, and I did 5 composers. I did 5 songs from 5. I started with Harold Arlen, and Duke Ellington's Billy Strayhorn, Richard Rodgers, George Gershwin, and Cole Porter. Now, at one point, I actually did a story show of Cole Porter music, solely called Cole Porter's music. On the 18th, Saturday, from 3 to 5 this month, I'm doing a show called An Oft-Told Tale, using a whole bunch of these things, the Hoagie Carmichael, and you know, just going right down.
How do you tie that in? What is the theme? Love?
It's a story. Yeah. Well, you know, the story is Oft-Told Tale. You know, girl meets boy, they get along, then they don't get along, then they break up to get another one. You know the story. So I start off with Skylark, Hoagie Carmichael, and I do Smoke Gets in Your Eyes in the show. I do Stardust. You know, it's a whole bunch of these things. But what the narration that I give gives the storyline. I start off with a young girl in college looking out.
You do the narration, and then you lead into the song.
And then the song lyrics further the story, so that you know that the two of them go together to tell the story.
This is very exciting. Where is this going to be?
Going to be at the Triad Theater on 158 West 72nd Street.
At what time?
And at 3 to 5 Saturday afternoon.
That should be very exciting. I know you're looking forward to that.
Oh, I am.
But
I am.
talk about today's music. Today's music is hip-hop and rap and so on. How do you, as a really classical jazz singer, relate to that? What is the thing that brings that kind of music together? I know people like Alicia Keys try to do that, but in your instance, you really feel the standards. I can see it in your face, I can hear it in your voice. How do you relate to that?
Well, when it first started, I just really didn't care for it at all. But lately, with people like the Black Eyed Peas, who are integrated, and they're beginning to integrate music into it, and so that it's not just the bang, the bang. Now, I am really glad that the impulse towards music that made these young boys develop the music of the rap when the schools took music out.
Very good.
They had to, you know, that had to come out of them, because music is like that. I mean, you know, once it gets a hold of you, you can't get rid of it, and it has to come out. And that's how they developed this, without having any idea what had been going on. But now, over the years, it's gotten so that they are beginning to integrate themselves, and they're actually really trained musicians are in doing the rap as well. So that you know, everything has to be sort of consolidated in.
In a sense, this repeats the history of jazz.
Yes.
Jazz came out of the black community, ragtime and so on,
Yeah.
and it was sort of outside of the mainstream.
Exactly.
And gradually, because of people like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, it began to infuse the mainstream, and now our music, black music, jazz, is the music of our nation.
Right.
This is one of the country's major contributions to world society.
Exactly.
Anywhere you go in the world,
Exactly.
you will hear jazz music, rap music, standards, etc.
Right.
The thing that I like is to hear someone like you sing these beautiful standards. First of all, you can hear the words.
That's important.
And
You've got
secondly,
to know what this song's about.
and the enunciation. For example, we were talking about Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra had this beautiful enunciation where he brought the words out.
Right.
Tony Bennett, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan,
Mabel Mercer.
Mabel Mercer, of course, she was the queen.
Yes.
And now Mabel Mercer sang mostly in France. Is that correct? Because she later came back and she was at the cookery with Barney Josephson for many, many years. But her main career, when it wasn't developing here, was in France.
Right.
Like Josephine Baker in France.
Right.
This is really interesting.
You know, our music is more acceptable in other countries. It's just been sort of lost here in the U.S., but as a matter of fact, that's why a lot of musicians lived over there. You know, like Art lived over there from '68 on, and so many of our people, because it is accepted there and in Japan, and they play it and it's used. We hear you say, okay, pooh.
Well, part of it is television. You got so much music and television, and the popular music goes into that. But there are jazz clubs, like what Wynton Marsalis is doing at Jazz Lincoln Center, to bring out the jazz, and people look for it now.
Exactly.
And if you look around, if you listen to a station like WBGO, you hear all of the jazz clubs. There are a lot of jazz clubs in New York, in Brooklyn, in Queens, some in the Bronx. So it's there. Now let me turn to your attorney work. What kind of legal work do you focus on, and did that have any bridge to music?
Actually, no.
But you were involved in helping to start the Black Bar Association in Brooklyn and so on. Tell us a little about that.
That was the Metropolitan Black Bar Association in 1984. Was a consolidation of Harlem Lawyers Association and Bedford-Stuyvesant Association. I had been one of the secretaries in Harlem Lawyers for years, and so I was part of the committee that was exploring this consolidation. We actually talked, and I having always been the secretary, I got to do the work. So which was quite fun because I love to put stuff together. And I was the one who went around to the various bars, black bars, even Westchester. But the only one that actually voted was the women's bar, Abois. But their vote wasn't sufficient to comply with the statutory requirements, so they didn't join. But we owned Macon B. Allen. All of them thought about it, but declined.
What was their resistance?
There was the idea that if they had their own thing, that you've got some, they had a certain amount of prestige, and if they put themselves into one thing, then they didn't have those opportunities.
But it really wasn't about prestige. It wasn't about making things better for black lawyers in general.
Exactly, but you know people.
Well, things have moved along. Many of our elected officials, Percy Sutton, Charlotte Rangel, David Dinkins, were lawyers.
Right.
And many, Basil Patterson.
And they were in the Harlem Lawyers.
And they worked through the NAACP in particular.
Right.
And right now we have far more male black lawyers, but we have far more female black lawyers. No. At the time you were starting, how large was the Women's Black Bar Association?
Well, no. When I started, there were no women. There were very few women. As a matter of fact, there were very few blacks in the law school. I was the only female in law school. So it was like a pioneer. And speaking of pioneer, when I came here because of Bob Ming and in his connection with the NAACP, he introducct me to Gloucester Kermit and Roy Wilkins and A. Philip Randolph, and that was how I got to be an associate in the law firm of Delson and Gordon in 1964.
So you were very lucky because you were able to
I was one of the first black lawyers to be in a sort of a semi-major firm.
And in addition to that, you were pursuing your music career.
Yeah,
How did
I
you-
was singing. As a matter of fact, I was singing in the choir at Rockefeller Church. What's the name?
Riverside.
Riverside. I sang there for years.
And then when did you start doing more work in jazz and the classics?
I started doing more work in jazz, I guess, about in the last 20 years.
And
Before that, I sang classical. I had my so-called town hall debut in '74, and it was,
But these classics must really bring you out, just like it brings everybody else out.
They do, because they speak to you. They speak to the human existence. And
Now let me ask this: how can your experience influence some of the younger black male and female vocalists?
well, hopefully, if they see the joy of the music that comes from this expression and this telling the story and sharing some of your heart with audience, that that they will want to do the same kind of thing with their own particular way of doing this thing, because everybody's got to do the music with their muse. Their muse has to tell them how they should do it. My muse tells me that I should sort of combine the classical sound with the jazz, but the thing is to do it with improvisation. And I don't know. I set the story out in the song the way it was written, and then I go from there, and and put my own little points to it.
Wouldn't it help if they listened to some of your music, some of Ella's music,
Sure.
some of Sarah's music?
It would help
some of
a lot.
Dinah? And I think when these young people experience this, sometimes they never had the opportunity.
They never heard
That's
it.
just amazing.
They love it when they hear it. The thing is that with the way the music business is, with Comcast and all of that, they don't get to hear it that much. Some of them never hear it, and when they hear it, they say, "Oh my goodness, how wonderful!"
Well, if they have an opportunity to hear you and to experience it, and maybe you should take a couple of them under your wing
I'd
and
love
get
to.
them to be,
Love
get them to
to.
be the new generation. Because things go around. The circle goes around and
That's right.
around and around. Just like the music used to go around and around. Not anymore. It's digital. But on the 18th, I hope that some of the people come to hear
I
your
hope so,
story. What's
too.
the name of your story?
An oft-told tale.
Okay, that's good. We'll close on an oft-told tale. Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Shirley Stewart Farmer, who's combined the career of law and music. And that is a fantastic opportunity that you've taken advantage of. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you.
Used to visit all the very gay places, those come what may places, where one ring